A lab experiment's gone off the rails, resulting in an increasingly giant spider roaming around the desert. Today we're looking at a pulpy 50s sci-fi movie full of mad science and old school effects. Join us as we discuss Tarantula. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a sci-fi movie. It's that simple. And in today's episode, we're going back to the 50s B-movie sci-fi atomic era genre, if you want to call it that, with Tarantula. It's about a big spider. That's the gist of the movie. There you go. That's the premise.
I feel like the movie pulled a bait and switch. Naming it Tarantula and making it about a spider seemed a bit too straightforward, but here we are.
Yeah, so we will start spoiler-free and give you a warning before we get to the spoilers in case you're worried about that. But of course, if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can give us 5 stars in your podcast app. And if you want to support the show financially, you can do that over Patreon or via YouTube membership and get bonuses. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So... yeah, I mean, experiments, it's the atomic era, it's all about... and admittedly, this is not nuclear testing that causes this, which I kind of would have assumed going in, just because that tends to be the reason in these movies. This is more just the science gone amok.
Yeah, it's the idea, you know, whenever you think of, like, scientists themselves, I feel like World War II was that pivotal period of, like, prior to that, it was like, you know, they're just kind of, like... dicking around, like don't know what they're doing. And then World War II happens, like we've unlocked the secrets of the universe in the atom, and now we're able to do goddamn anything. Yep.
So we'll get into everything. We have our main character is a local town doctor in this small town in Arizona. We have a scientist character, of course. We have the sheriff, and we have, I guess we'll call it the love interest / assistant scientist, but our female lead is Stephanie, but she goes by Steve. I've never heard of Steve being a nickname for Stephanie before, but I'll go with it.
The only time I've ever heard it is like Stevie Nicks, but I don't even know if that's a nickname. Like that, for all I know, that's the normal name.
It might be, but even if it is a nickname, like I wouldn't necessarily assume Stephanie. Nothing connects those two names in my head at all. So
no, definitely not.
It is what it is. But yeah, we've got a giant tarantula, which the movie obviously kind of teases throughout, and it's the last like maybe 15-20 minutes where you're getting a lot of big spider action. But we'll get into all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. I assume you hadn't seen this before?
Pete, what would ever make you think that? I'm a B-movie aficionado. I've seen all of these 1950s whatever giant monster things. No, I haven't seen this one. I didn't know anything about this one, and frankly, I haven't looked into it that deeply even after finishing the movie. I don't really have a good grasp on whether or not this was like a majorly popular release, or if this were like just a tinier little B-movie that was put out and everyone kind of forgot about over time. I really can't tell.
Well, I mean, could be somewhere in the middle of those two things. I don't think it has to be one of those extremes. Sure. Yeah, I mean, this was back in the double feature day, so movies were like 80 minutes, so they'd packaged together for like one kind of 3-hour kind of block. This was kind of one of those. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're dealing with like optical effects and like trying to blend footage of a real spider in with like, you know, foregrounds of like normal size things to try and make it appear huge. Obviously, this is long before CG, and it wasn't even like they were using miniatures or anything like that. This is about, well, maybe there were some miniatures, like maybe some buildings and stuff in the foreground, but you know what I mean? The spider itself is just footage of a real spider with some trickery in the camera to try and blend things together. But that is the gist of what we're talking about today. So we'll get into the feelings, and then we'll go in a bit deeper. So David, what did you think of Tarantula?
I for the most part I liked it. I think you were hopping on there with the optical effects, and I think that's very strong, and that is obviously a major centerpiece of this movie is the effects. And there's I don't think you've mentioned it outright, so I don't want to spoil anything, but there's another subplot that's going on that gets very heavy on like practical effects, like actual physical like makeup stuff like that. And I think that's also very strong. So collectively over the course of this, the effects are good. They're very solid for what they are. I don't think there's any point in the movie where it felt too much at any point, or like they were pushing the bounds past what they were capable of. The counterpoint to that is I think that the story feels very rushed. It feels very paper thin. By the time that we actually get to the giant spider stuff, it feels like we're so much more invested in the other subplot that the giant spider like kind of doesn't make sense as the center point of the movie by that point. Eventually it almost gets there, but for me this is much more of two different entirely separate storylines that just so happen to be linked at the very beginning of the movie. So character-wise, I like the characters, but yeah, plot-wise, it was just very fast-paced, very rushed. I could have stayed to see this slowed down just a little bit, or at the very least, cut down on the subplot so it doesn't feel like it is eating up so much of the initial half compared to the tarantula itself. So overall, still good.
Yeah, I think this is a fun 50s B movie. I think the spider stuff is pretty good. I think what you were getting at there is, I think it's because I think if a movie came out now and it had kind of this problem with the focus of its story, it would probably be some kind of weird thing where we would be critiquing the script and critiquing their focus. Is it two stories blending together? Did they really want to make something else, but they were actually try to shoehorn in the thing they really wanted to make at the same time? I don't think any of that applies to this movie. I think with this movie, and particularly in this era, what this is okay, well, we want to do a giant spider movie. We have the trickery and the effects and the budget to pull off X minutes of giant spider stuff. What do we fill the rest of the movie with? Well, we'll tie it to all this stuff with the scientist, which gives the origin of the spider, but also gives us this extra subplot. And because we do spend like the first half or so focused on that subplot, it does kind of feel like, okay, they kind of tease the spider, but then it kind of, it's like, we go like 30, 40 minutes with nothing spider related, and then the spider starts coming back into it. It does feel a little bit hodgepodge, but it genuinely feels in this case of it just had to be this way because of what they had time and money to pull off with the spider, so they kind of filled time with this other thing that sort of, you know, is all more about the man responsible for it, and like, you know, what else is going on there, and why the spider was given something that made him big in the first place. So yeah, I think it's a completely fair critique. I also, you know, I think there could have been a bit more spider action at the end before we ultimately get to the wrap up. You know, it gets there a little bit quickly, but you know, for the scenes that they had, for the things they could pull off, those moments are fun. I think the actors are likable enough, and you know, they feel very classic, you know, B movie Hollywood kind of. You know, everyone's charming, everyone's kind of nice to each other, everything's kind of just hunky-dory. There's nothing wrong in small-town America in the 1950s. Everyone's just helpful to each other. But, yeah, so, you know, there's a little bit of a sense of humor to it. It's not taking itself too seriously, for the most part. So, is there improvements to be made? Absolutely. But I think for the era it's made in, it kind of fits nicely into a very, very watchable like monster movie. Yeah, so I would say so. There was no point in this where I was like checking the time. It didn't, like I said, it felt more rushed than anything else. So it wasn't like I was bored. It wasn't like I was losing interest or anything. If anything, I wanted to see more of what it had to offer. I wanted them to be able to expand on the spider stuff, and not at the inherent detriment of the initial plot. I think you could have even extended this out slightly and made it work. But you're right, is that there's a certain amount of budget, amount of special effects that they had the ability to do. It felt like they explored pretty much every option they had available to them, outside of if they did want to go the route of like miniatures and stuff like that a bit heavier. Because I agree. I think there are a few shots in here that are definitely miniatures, but for the most part, it is all just that optical effects and like double exposure sort of stuff. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it might have just been how I was viewing it, the tarantula is almost entirely pitch black.
for like the entirety of it. Like there's barely any texture on it for most of the shots, which feels very much like a camera necessity.
Yeah, I think definitely at times. I mean, maybe it's just a case of like the version you watched was a bit like poor in the contrast or something, but but it was definitely very dark for a large part of the scenes, especially the earlier times you see it moving around. Yeah, I think the spider action is mostly pretty good, and I think maybe the one thing that would have helped make it feel a bit better paced is the thing that does ultimately, and I don't know, it's a spoiler to say, the thing that ultimately wins. I think that could have been more of a struggle or more of a we have to hold out till this thing kind of thing, just to make it feel like it was a bit more of a thing to get to that point. It did feel like it happened quite quickly after like another thing failed, and it was like, okay, that felt a little easy in the grand scheme of things. But that's about it.
I swear to God, I was fully expecting it. Like as soon as it succeeds, I was fully expecting like an ad to pop up saying like buy yours now. Like it happened so conveniently. It just felt like it was like a marketing ploy for whatever it was.
Yeah. But no, I had a good time. Like, I mean, I think, you know, there's some charming elements to it. I think it doesn't. I think its simplicity in some ways kind of helps it, especially once it starts getting to the, okay, we're starting to actually be concerned with something that's killing people around town. And what is this? And in most movies, that would be the opening act. Most movies like this, you'd start off with a couple of people have died. What's going on there? Let's investigate what's going on. But this movie doesn't actually get to that point until like halfway through.
Oh yeah, it's weird because the movie does open with the death of someone, but it has nothing to do with the tarantula. It's the subplot. Like we focus so much on that subplot thing, and by the time that wraps up, we're like, all right, now back to the tarantula.
Well, it is related to the tarantula. It's not completely disconnected.
Right. No, the tarantula stems out of the subplot. It starts up from there. So anything the subplot's doing is inherently related some way, but it does feel like it is entirely doing its own thing while the tarantula is just in the back getting bigger. And then when it's finally at a sufficient size, it's like, all right, now it's a threat. Let's jump in.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know how much more to say without spoilers, because I feel like we want to talk about the plot, we want to talk about the spider stuff and how they actually how they handle those scenes. I mean, do you have anything particular to say about the main cast of characters here?
I like them all. I think maybe it's a script writing thing more so than anything else, but every once in a while they would start just throwing around first names. And like I think it's like Matt specifically is one of them, and I had a problem keeping track of like who exactly was who. Like every once in a while they would throw out these first names, and I know them by their roles. There's the reporter, there's the sheriff, there's the doctor, there's the scientist. And so when they start just saying a first name out randomly, I'm sure I could have paid more attention and really understood who it was they were talking about, but that was the only time that I felt like I was getting a little bit confused by what is essentially a very simplistic plot. But no, the characters are fine. I think each of them is written well. I don't think there's any character that stands out as annoying or unnecessary for any particular thing. So good on them for that.
Yeah, I think there's and I'm not even complaining here, because I don't think it's badly intentioned or anything, but there was kind of like a time capsule moment when our lead character, or doctor, is meeting Steve for the first time, and she mentions she's a scientist, or she's a student anyway, becoming a scientist, and he says, oh, that's what happens when you give women the vote. You get female scientists. And he says it in this sort of smelly, jokey way. He's not trying to, condemn it or anything, but she smiles back at him, and all I could think was, yeah, this is clearly like from a much earlier time period where that's like a recent development.
Dude, there is a point in this movie, it's related to subplots, so I won't spoil too much, but they talk about the population. They talk about the human population growing and all that. Yeah.
And he makes a guess. He makes a guess for what it'll be in 2000, and he's like, by the way, undercooking it.
we're currently at like 3 billion people on the planet, and by the year 2000, we're going to be at like 3.75 billion. It's like, bro, we're at 7. You're screwed. Everything you imagined is wrong.
Well, now to be correct, he did say we were at 2 million. Or 2 billion, sorry, not million, okay. Obviously. Yeah. We were at 2 billion, and then he said that by 2000 would be like 3.7. Now, we weren't, to be fair, we weren't at 7 or even 8 back then. Obviously, we were about 6
I think
billion.
we were at 7 at 2000.
No, I always remember hearing 6 billion when I was about that age.
All right, hold on. 2000, not 200. 2000, you stupid bastard. All right. No, I guess you're right. 6.1. Damn, that blew up quick.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was surprised when they eventually started saying 7 billion. I went, wait, it was only 6 billion, like, 10 years ago, whatever it was. So.
Yep, and now we're at 8. Oh, God.
Yeah, to it. And this doctor's talking about, can we even feed 3.5 billion people? Like, dude.
I guess it kind of makes sense because the big thing that really did set it off was the baby boom. Like, it was the post-war. And at that point, they probably didn't, realize exactly how big of an impact it would have had.
Yeah. But, that was an interesting little slice of life time capsule moment. So, yeah, no, good fun. Yeah, I guess we should get into spoilers here, I guess. It was funny though, because I was looking up the main trio, which is the doctor, the professor, and Steve. I was looking up just kind of like, I wonder when all these people died, because obviously this is a movie from the 50s, so I assume they're all dead. The actress who played Steve only just died this year. Wow, and she was 95, so she had a good run. To be fair, the other two guys had a good run too. They lived to their 80s, but the doctor character, his actor John Agar, he died in 2002, and then the professor was in the 70s or 80s, but he lived to 80 something. So he was he was born 1880 or something stupid like that. So
he would have been a newborn baby in the time period of Back to the Future 3.
Yes. That's legitimately when he's coming from. Which, just imagine we think about how much technology's advanced in our time lives. Just imagine being born in Back to the Future Part 3 timeline, and then by the time you die, it's the 60s or 70s, and you're like, geez.
I always consider it the period between 1904 and the 1960s, because 1904 was the very first airplane flight and the 60s was the moon landing. So if you lived across those two, it's like, oh, okay, everything's different. Yeah,
that's as wild to think about. So yeah, because I feel like every time I watch an old movie like this, I usually click on at least one of the big names, and it's like, oh, he died at 47, suddenly from multiple heart attacks or something. And it's like, oh, it's always so depressing. But no, the three leads here all lived pretty long lives. So fair play. Particularly impressive living through this atomic era where there's radiation everywhere and giant spiders coming at you.
It's not even obviously whenever it's the radiation and giant spiders that's a problem, but it's always the silent killers you never think of, oh yeah, let's just throw asbestos everywhere. We're not going to worry about that. No problems.
Yeah, they weren't thinking about that too much yet, were they, I suppose, in 1955. Nope. So yeah, so we'll say spoilers just so we can talk freely about the movie, so you've been warned. We're going to get into it. So the big thing in the movie, aside from the spider, right, and what leads into the spider, is that the professor is doing experiments with, he's trying to create this formula that'll basically increase our food supply by making animals much bigger, right? They see a guinea pig that's the size of a big dog, and it's okay, if you make the cows 10 times as big, that's 10 times as much beef, right? That makes sense.
I'm sure it doesn't come with any sort of downsides or anything like that at all.
Yeah, where are we keeping all these big cows? Assuming this takes off and we're keeping a farm of cows, how many big cows can we fit?
I mean, they're out in the middle of New Mexico. No one's living in that old desert area.
Because that's where cows thrive. Desert.
Yeah. They don't need to live for long. They literally said that it's 6 days from birth to actually able to be slaughtered.
It's very efficient. I'll say that. But yeah, the whole start of the movie is that someone with a very, very deformed face stumbles out into the desert and dies, and the mystery of how this man died is kind of what propels the start of the movie. And it turns out this was the assistant to the professor, and later on we basically find out that he took this serum himself, which I actually am still kind of confused by why he thought they'd ever need to do human testing. What was the purpose of giving this to a human exactly?
Yeah, they make a quick little jab at it, but honestly, I don't think I picked it up either. It basically, the disease that they come down with is supposed to be a lifelong affliction. It's called acromegaly, I believe, and it's apparently the same. It's the same thing that Andre the Giant has. That's his actual thing, was acromegaly, but obviously theirs is onset over the course of a few days rather than their entire lives, so it takes on a different look.
Yeah, it takes decades, if any, if even any deformities are even going to form. It'll take years and years and years to get to that stage where this guy was fine like a week ago, and now he looks like this, and he's died from it, right? He stumbled over and died. So yeah, so why he felt the need to take it is kind of up in the air. And also, there's a second character who's taken it, who is plays a big part early on in the movie for causing a bit of a disaster at the lab. And I think this is supposed to be their previous assistant, because they kind of allude to a previous assistant before that part, or sometime later in the movie. And I'm like, I guess that's who that was. But to be honest, I kind of was expecting, as soon as this other deformed character showed up and attacked the professor in this early scene, I thought, oh, we're going to have to explain who this guy is or who this woman is and why they're so hell-bent on attacking the professor. But honestly, they never really go into their motivations, or like, was it the professor for... Because it almost implied to me the professor had forced them to take this and this was a revenge tactic. But nothing in the rest of the movie actually suggests that.
The very beginning that we get is that the body's brought in, the doctor comes to look at it, he says like, oh, this guy must have this disease, but like, it can't be the same guy that we think it is, because that would take years to develop. And then the professor comes in and says, nope, that's him. He was rapid onset. Don't ask questions.
And the doctor disagrees with this diagnosis. Even though it looks like this thing, it can't be, because it takes years and years and years. This doesn't make any sense. But the professor's like, oh, medicine works in mysterious ways, blah, blah, blah.
But that's the bit, that as soon as he starts doing that, as soon as he starts saying, don't worry about it, doctor, I'm like, okay, he's evil. Like, he is absolutely like doing human testing. There's something wrong here. And when we get back to the lab and we see this guy, this other assistant, come out and attack him, everything's still pointing to that. Everything's pointing out to like forced human testing. But no, probably not. No, it doesn't feel like it is.
No, because everything after that is like, you know, because basically the other assistant dies like right after he attacks the professor and injects the professor with his serum. So it's like, okay, he's done that intentionally.
So he's got like 4 days now to live.
So it feels like a revenge thing, but then we find out, no, the other scientist, right, the one who died at the start of the movie, he self-injected when the professor wasn't around. Are we assuming then that maybe he injected the assistant that took revenge?
Either that, I remember there being a line that specifically was someone saying like, oh, he was so confident in his serum or whatever like that he decided to do it. And I feel like that was the first assistant who just stumbled out into the wasteland. I have nothing on the second one. I have no idea where that one came from, why he had the serum.
I think calling
doesn't make sense.
The first guy an assistant was maybe a bad word choice, because I think he's also a scientist. I think it's like partners, and then the second one that attacks the professor is an assistant, and that's who the young woman replaces.
Perhaps... maybe the first one, the partner, injected himself because he's confident in his serum and he thought like it'll do good things or whatever.
Yeah, but what he expects it to do when the entire purpose of it is to enlarge animals, I don't know.
Look,
but
he wanted a bigger penis, Peter. That's where it always is. It's that. But maybe once he started coming down with symptoms, the assistant was kind of like forced into / like, we have to inject you so that we can like run tests or whatever to find a cure for the first guy before he dies. And then it didn't work out.
It didn't work. It's the exact same thing happened to him as what happened to the first guy. Yeah. So yeah, that part of it was a little bit wonky to me, because it didn't really matter after that point. It was really just all a vehicle for when he attacks the professor, it breaks open some of the cages with the animals and obviously the glass tank that the spider's in, so the tarantula is able to leave the building and no one's there. And the professor, because a little fire starts and it kills a couple of the animals, he assumes the tarantula also died in the fire. And it's like, okay, so he's on the loose and that's fine. But so much of the next chunk of the movie is the doctor kind of questioning and doing an autopsy and meeting Stevie for the first time, and, you know, again questioning the professor. Hey, you know, I've looked into the body, and he doesn't find that. And to be fair, when he looks at the body and he does the autopsy, like, no, I mean, there's no foul play, there's nothing suspicious. It does look like this disease. It doesn't make sense to him, but he at this point kind of has to kind of admit he's got nothing to stand on other than just his gut feeling says that there's something weird about it. So that's kind of it, and this all just kind of keeps going. And he meets Stevie, he gives her a ride. There's a whole There's a minor comedy character, actually. The doctor, where his office is, because he does a lot of out calls. He keeps going out to people and sort of things. But when
I don't think he spends more than 6 seconds in his office at any given point before he has to leave again.
That is very true. But the one thing they establish about his office is that there's like a guy who is like the receptionist, who is kind of like giving him advice and like sending his calls through and whatever. But the one running gag they have is that this receptionist guy always just listens in on the phone calls and then offers an opinion when he comes out of his office, and the doctor gives him a little jab about it or whatever. But he's the one when Steve, the young woman, comes in and says she's looking for a cab or a bus out to the scientist's house. He's like, oh, there won't be another, the cab driver. We've got one cab driver and he's drunk for the next 5 hours or something. But then when the doctor comes in and says, oh, I'm going out to that scientist's house because I've got questions about things that have happened, he's like, oh, this young lady's going out there. Why don't you introduce yourself to each other? And they both, by this point, are like, they're wise to his shtick, so they both say no at the same time. But that sets up and it's not even like it's a big romance per se. It's like they don't even kiss by the end of the movie, but there's clearly just a little bit of flirtation here or there. Throughout the
like, it
first half
starts
of the
off
movie.
with just like, oh, are you going to invite me back over to the professor's place? Wink, 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 wink. Like, it's flirting the entire time, but at no point does the story ever slow down enough for them to actually do anything.
Yeah, because it's not like some movies would have them kind of fall for each other just before all the stuff starts, so that there's like extra tension of like them wanting to like make sure each other are okay during all the chaos. They never do that here. Once things get into it, if anything, it's maybe a little bit of a shame that once stuff does go down the last part of the movie, it does kind of feel like, honestly, both of them feel like they don't really contribute that much in the last 10 minutes. Like, they're both just kind of there to witness what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
But
no, that's I would say for the entire cast, because what they say the threat is it's going to head towards town. We have to evacuate the town, and then just kind of off camera, the town is evacuated. So it doesn't actually ever feel like there's a major threat going into that third act, except for the tarantula will maybe knock over some buildings or kill some stragglers.
But so like all of this stuff is perfectly fine. But the doctor is starting to get a little bit more sick. She's starting to notice that he's looking a little bit different. He's also mad. The professor's mad at her because she once again has the doctor character over when he gives her a lift back again. But one of the little like old timey things actually that stuck out to me is just randomly in the middle of the movie. She's like, "Okay, I'm going to town. I might be a scientist, but a girl's got to get her hair done." And I'm like, all right, okay, we're still writing her like a female character in a 1950s
absolutely.
movie. We're not pretending that she cares more about science than typical women stuff. And not only that, when she goes into town and the doctor runs into her and is like, "Oh, I need to go talk to her. I like her." She's carrying a bunch of like packages, and I'm like, oh, also women be shopping apparently, because she can't go into town without having a whole host of things she's purchased. It feels very like, okay, we're going to have a female scientist, but we're still going to do a lot of like, I'm not going to say sexist, but just very stereotypical tropes. Yeah.
I especially love, if you really think about it, she got into town. She walked into this place and said, "Hey, I need to go out further. Or I need to get like a bus or something like that." I guess she doesn't have a car. She didn't drive. She just walked into this desert town. Like,
how did
she get here?
We see her get off a bus, you tool.
She gets off okay, then why didn't she just take the bus? Like, is it multiple bus routes? I feel like a small town like this would only have one bus.
Yeah, I mean, this is the bus going from like town to town. This is not a local bus. This is
all right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. What are you talking about?
I don't know. Weird. That feels weird to me. It feels weird to me that she gets off the bus and says, "I need a bus to get back into the."
That's not weird.
Place.
Do you know how many places you have to get multiple buses to get to? That's not strange at all.
Not in America, Pete. I know how it is across the pond, but here we're lucky to have one bus per town ever.
That's such a weird, like, oh, why did you stay in the bus? I'm like, why are you assuming that bus went to the location she needed to go in? That's very strange to me. This is you looking for a plot hole where there are none to be found. You're just banging your head against the ground.
I'm not criticizing it. I don't know. It's one of those things that, like, again, with how fast-paced everything is here, there's nothing that's really given focus. Nothing needs to, like, really hold on to like a plot point to explain it or anything like that. They do the bare bones. They say, all right, this is what it is. And then they move on. They just immediately jump to whatever the next bit is. Even there's one bit where the scientist, he's got, I don't even know. I'm assuming it's his serum. It's whatever he's working on.
Yeah. He's got the box that has the gloves in it, so he can do stuff with it without it contaminating him.
And that's the key, without him contaminating it. But what he does is he fills up a syringe inside the box. He pulls it out, handles it with his bare hands, and then squeezes it.
I noticed that as well.
Like, all right, what are we doing?
Is it dangerous or isn't it? Because you just squirted some of it into the air anyway. Yeah, I did. I did notice that. It felt like, okay, we're going to make it look like this is very serious and very scientific and got a strict procedure. But then he just did something that he's also seen on TV. He was like, oh, you have to tap it and give it a little squirt.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if the director's like, why did you do that? We just went through that whole thing. Why did you do that?
But also, equally wouldn't surprise me if the director's also the one saying, no, you have to do the tap and the little squirt, because otherwise it won't look right. And he's like, but what was the point of having it in the box then, in the gloves?
Also, there's I wouldn't even call it a bit, because it's literally just paid off in a jump scare, more or less. There's a little monkey, like a little lab monkey that they got, and it looks like he's about to try to inject the monkey with the serum. And then after the attack from the assistant, he goes off into the desert to bury the body, and we get this sequence of like the monkey's shadow, but you think it's a tarantula. The shadow comes up into frame, and then the monkey just jumps on him, and he's like, oh, you gave me a scare. Anyway, and then the monkey's gone from the rest of the bit. Like, it's not a recurring little pet sidekick. It's just there for that one tiny scare.
Yeah, I think the two things that stick out about the whole like attack on the professor, right? One is that him burying the body afterwards without telling anyone about it does feel fishy. It's like, okay, you're covering up your tracks here and being very secretive about your work at the very least, if not doing outright malicious stuff. But point number two is I do kind of like how it's mostly silent when the attack happens. Like, I'm not saying there's no music, but there's no dialogue really. Like, once he starts attacking, it feels like this sort of silent struggle between them, and I kind of like the vibe of it.
I really like all the desert stuff. I think that it really suits the term well, because whenever you think of like tarantulas or whatever, at least for me, I think of like a deserty area, and so it really suits the creature to be out in that sort of situation. And then also the idea that this town feels isolated. It doesn't feel like there is another town for another 20 miles in any direction.
And that's pretty typical your 50s B movies, honestly. They tend to be that. In fact, speaking of 50s B movies and stuff of this nature, I mean, Jack Arnold, who directed this, also did Creature from the Black Lagoon, did It Came From Outer Space, which is one that we did already. Did a lot of movies in this time period of this kind of caliber. So not surprising to have a lot of similarities popping up with some of them.
I wish I would have looked at the director. I would have done It Came From Outer Space for my homework. Unfortunately, did not.
No, you did that episode.
Oh, that was me. Sorry. You're right. I forgot that was that one.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, that was me. Here's the thing. That one is, I remember saying this in the review, it's such a bland, broad title that it literally can apply to like anything.
I love the idea that when you're done like catching up on all the movies, you're just going to start doing homework on the episodes you did yourself.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
to refresh.
All right, everybody, here's Infinity Pool. Oh, God.
Just go in order. Just go in order for that you did them in originally. Yeah,
absolutely,
that's the idea. So, I mean, all this is solid enough stuff. And obviously, once the professor is looking pretty rough, and we get the big reveal, because she screams, obviously, when she sees him or whatever. And
when he's criticizing her for bringing the doctor in, you can tell they start with the prosthetics. Like, it starts showing his skin is getting puffier and more ragged.
Yeah, subtle at first. Yeah, not like super extreme, but definitely starting to be visible. And from that point on is when kind of it starts to shift a little bit more towards the spider. Because, I mean, I think there's like one shot early on when he's driving her back to the professor's place where you see the spider on the road, like, after they've driven off. And it's not, like, super huge yet. I mean, it's big for a spider, obviously. It's, like, the size of a big dog. Or something like that. But it's not at like kaiju size, which is what it's ultimately going to become. But once we do start teasing stuff, it becomes, before we even see anything, we just hear You know, because it was the second time he drives her out, they take a seat to have a chat by some rocks, and there's a bit of a landslide, kind of, and it's like, oh, the spider might have done that kind of thing. And the doctor comes back here to try and figure out how this little rock slide happened, and the sheriff like catches him and says, "Hey, I'm heading out to this ranch because apparently some of the cattle have turned up dead. Do you want to come and have a look with me?" And he's like, "Sure, buddy, let's go have a look." And when they get there, like when they say some of the cattle's turned up dead, like there is just skeletons left over. Like everything has just been taken off the bone. It's comical.
It's like saying that I'm blanking on his name, but the guy who becomes RoboCop. It's like saying that, like, oh, he suffered a minor shooting injury. It's like, yeah, no, I'd say so.
Yeah. So they're like, well, there's nothing we could do about it. Keep an eye on it, I suppose. Keep guard and call us if anything happens. And it's that night we get our first like proper attack. And the way they always sort of, obviously we get the shots of the spider coming towards and it's like coming over the hill or whatever. But the way they like to end these attacks, because they don't have the effects obviously to do like something where you see them get grabbed or anything, is we get this almost POV shot from the spider with a couple of the legs like dangling down, like out of focus in the foreground as
like
the person
fangs
screams.
are like right over top at the very top of the frame.
So he screams and it's like, okay, all right, we've had our first kill, and that's going to lead us into like, well, now he's dead. Although they actually have another kill that they investigate, because the doctor is at the next one, and then the sheriff says, oh, by the way, that ranch guy also got killed last night. And the second one is a car, which in the same night, it was just driving along, and the spider just like flips it off the road and it goes tumbling onto the desert.
See, this is where I was almost a little bit annoyed with the movie, because while, yes, I did enjoy all this stuff of like investigating the professor character and doing all that stuff, if you were to open the movie with these piles of this mysterious white liquid, this car that was thrown off the road and nobody knows what caused it, like, I would be so invested in the mystery of what this is. And then you can fill out the backstory later. But like, I kind of wanted to open with this sort of stuff happening.
I think a more modern movie would have done. I think this is just a case of like going as straightforward as possible, because maybe they didn't think about trying to shake things up yet. But you know, I think this stuff is good, like the crime scene stuff, if you want to call it that, where they're looking at the skeletons of these people and like, what the hell's doing this? And then he sees the big pools of the white liquid. It's not what you think it is, audience. Get that dirty thought out of your head. It's spider venom, to be precise.
Wink.
But you know, he takes a sample of it, and there's a bit actually where he's looking at it under a microscope and he's like, well, I'm not entirely sure exactly what it is, but I think it's related to insect venom. And my ears perked up and I went, wait a minute, don't tell me this movie's going to try and tell us that spiders are insects. But to be fair, the whole point of that is that he is not an expert, and when he does go to an expert later on, the expert says, no, this is not insects, this is an arachnid venom. And it's like, okay, the movie knows what it's doing, it's fine.
I really like this bit because, strangely enough, it reminded me of Primer. If you remember at the very beginning of Primer, when they first like make the time machine, the thing that happens is there's a whole bunch of mold that like starts growing inside of it, or like a fungus or something. And then they take it to a scientist and say like, yeah, no, it's just this basic ass fungus, but it's like 100 years worth of fungus has been grown here. Like, it is so much more than we have ever had in a single sample. And it's the same thing here, where they're like, yeah, it's just basic tarantula venom, nothing special about it. But like, you must have had 100 tarantulas in order to get me this itty bitty little sample that you brought in. Meanwhile, there's a massive pool at the place that he still could have more of.
Yeah, that was the only thing notable about it, is the quantity of it and how many spiders it would typically take. But obviously by this point as well, he's already heard about the doctor's oversized animals, right? He's already seen the evidence of this and heard about it. So he's putting two and two together in his head, where he's like, oh God, I'm starting to worry about a giant spider. So there is a nice momentum building up to like everything going on in the third act. And the professor's looking worse and worse, and kind of some of the big set pieces again, there's more spider attacks. The spider that comes over the hill, like there's those two guys like drinking at a campfire or whatever, and the spider comes over the hill and chases after them. Maybe the biggest set piece though, and this is when the doctor's kind of on his way back and he's worried about Steve, so he's driving out there, is she's like in her like, you know, nightgown, and she's got like a bathrobe on and she's getting ready for bed. and the spider's like coming towards the big house. And I kind of love this because you get some cool like up close shots of like its face like looking through the window. It's like a proper horror movie thing. The only thing that maybe like is the element of disbelief is like, I'm pretty sure something this size would be making some noise as it comes towards you. I don't care if it is a tarantula, like it's so big.
Yeah, I guess that's one of those things of like, okay, what is like the actual mass of this thing now? And I would, yeah, it probably would be making thudding noises, but I also don't think it would be like, you know, it's got 8 legs to spread that weight across. Perhaps it would be a little less than Godzilla.
That's fair. You could say less than Godzilla, but silent is a very different thing.
I just imagine them going to the Foley department being like, we need you to come up with the sound of a tarantula the size of a building. And they're just like, well, it's got to be tippy taps, but it's got to be loud tippy taps.
Yeah, so the professor actually dies here. She gets out in the building. They've got some good practical effects here. They've got like a set that's shaking and bits are falling down and all the rest of it. And she's trying to get out, and then the doctor's out front. He's just pulled up in his car, and she runs to him. So the one advantage they have here is that you can drive away from this thing. It can't keep up with a car. But if you're on foot, you're screwed, right? It'll get you. So
I will say, when he went to the, I guess, science, the spider scientist, whatever we want to call him specifically, the professional, he specifically said that if there was a spider the size that like he's talking about, that for some reason it wouldn't be as harmless and docile as like a normal tarantula is to people. It would be cruel and a vicious hunter. So for some reason, it growing up so big has made it evil.
Well, I think it was less evil because he shows him like a film reel. He's like, hey, here's a tarantula taking on a rattlesnake, and here's a tarantula doing this and that, and we get some footage of it. And basically what he's saying is that tarantulas don't feel fear. They're ballsy little shitheads. So I think the idea is that if they're so big they can overpower everything, then they would just become like an unstoppable menace.
That makes sense. I guess I'm so used to movies doing a thing where like it still maintains its natural instincts that to say that a tarantula is just always looking to cause a fight and the only thing stopping it is its size is kind of weird to me.
I think it's fair to assume though that because of its size it would need to eat a lot, so that's why it's just constantly hunting people the bigger it gets. So that makes enough sense to me.
Yeah, that part makes sense to me, yeah.
And the Spider-Man the Spider-Man does explain that he the spider like sort of partially digests before it eats, like it spits out its web, or not web, but whatever it's spitting out to like, and that's why there's just skeletons that are being left, because the flesh and the skin and all that's being dissolved before it's even ingested. So all you're getting left with is the bones. Now I'm sure they wouldn't be as clean and as neat as what the movie presents, but I like the logic. I like it's like, oh, that's why it's just nothing but skeletons left behind.
Yeah,
so,
no, I'm fine with
cool.
that. Makes sense.
Oh, that's nice. And then by this point, obviously, he's informing the police. The police see it. The sheriff sees the spider coming to work. I love that they leave 2 cops behind to try and fire machine guns. And like, hey, if it gets too close, just take the doctor's car. But of course, the doctor's car at this point won't start, so they just get killed. I'm like, you 2 are red shirts. That's all you are. Moving on.
If I ever have to write like a horror comedy, I'm absolutely naming the people who have to die like Dr. Red and Dr. Shirt. Like, there's no way I'm not going to do that.
So, yeah, but at this point, they've called in the Air Force, and this is the thing that I wish was like expanded upon a little bit, because the Air Force are ultimately what wins, right? And that's fine. I'm cool with them being this kind of saving grace that comes in because they've got actual real firepower. Because the whole thing that the town do, like the doctor and the sheriff and a few of the others, like they get a bunch of dynamite from the miners like building, and like we're going to try and blow up the dynamite, and it doesn't work, but it's a fun sequence, and the spider walks through it. It looks quite good for what it is, and it's all good. But obviously they have to fail first. If the first thing they try takes out the spider, it's kind of a shit monster. So it's like, yeah, okay, that works. And I love the shots at the very end of the movie where the spider's coming towards the town, and as the Air Force are bombing the shit out of it, it doesn't work quite at first, but that final shot of the spider on fire, and you can just see a few of the legs kind of like sticking out of the fire, is a really cool shot. So I think that's great. I just wish that it felt like we have to try and survive until they get here. Like, make it feel a bit more of like a tense thing where, oh, the Air Force are going to be here in 20 minutes. We have to find a way to keep the spider, like, you know, like in view for 20 minutes. Like, give them a kind of a ticking clock where they have to sort of like try and survive. Maybe have another couple of deaths in the meantime as they're trying to like keep the spider in a general area for the Air Force to target, kind of thing.
I don't even think you need it to be so much as they need to be like taking on the spider. I think you just need to have more stakes, because the biggest issue, like I said, is they say the town is evacuated. If you give me instead, like, we're trying to evacuate the town, but like the hospital is going to be too hard. Like, we can't do that.
Or there's
something.
Or there's enough people who just don't believe you because it's a hard thing to believe there's a giant spider coming towards the town. Like, show a few innocent people in the town, especially in the end when the spider's coming towards it and it's like, oh shit, they're realizing they're going to die, kind of thing.
Yeah, just anything. But instead you have like one car, maybe like 7 people just watching across the horizon as an uncredited Clint Eastwood flies in his jet fighter. Yeah, I saw that online. That's a Clint Eastwood appearance. But no, he comes in, and the other bit that got me was, while they're talking about how do we take this thing down, we're calling up the Air Force, what do we tell them to bring? And they basically say, look, we'll handle dynamite, tell them to bring whatever missiles they have, and then like kind of tacks on to the end. They're like, maybe napalm? Let's try napalm. Let's give that a shot. And then fast forward to the jet fighter showing up. They fire off the missiles. The missiles do nothing. And then they fire off the napalm. And the napalm just works. Like, it's not, fire is the natural enemy of tarantulas or anything like that. It's just, no, the napalm is just going to kill anything. And it's so effective. It's so good at doing it that I genuinely expected there to be like a, remember kids, napalm, good for the health.
I mean, the shot though when it's on fire at the end with the legs sticking out is so good. It's such a good shot. So I don't even begrudge how it ends. I just wish they sort of like built up to it a bit more with a bit more tension.
I think all they needed to do to make me believe this ending here, A, get the town more tense, but B, when he's destroying something, when the tarantula is destroying something, a small fire breaks out. Something happens that shows that the tarantula is especially either scared of or can be damaged by fire. You do that, and I think it easily sells the napalm ending.
Sells that, but I do think a bit of a time element, like even just something as simple as the spider's going to be here, will the Air Force get here in time? Kind of thing, you know, just something that makes it feel like we're crunching against the time, and oh no, they do show up just in the last second to save the day, kind of thing. Just a few things would have just upped the ending. Like a couple of the shots are really cool, which is why I don't think it feels like a dud. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, there's definitely improvements to be made here. You know, everything feels a little bit too, I don't know, easy, because like you say, there's a bit of stakes lacking from what's going on. But yeah, I mean, some of the shots are a nice bit of spectacle. I can't really complain from that side of things. And yeah, that's pretty much the movie. I mean, obviously, it's a fairly straightforward film, all things considered. I guess the only thing I would say is that back when the scientist, Spider-Man, was showing the footage, he mentioned that the natural rival to the tarantula is this like desert wasp or thing. And I was like,
I was expecting them to make a giant wasp.
I was like, are they going to make a giant wasp to fight the spider? But then I suppose the problem is what do you do with the giant wasp thing once the spider's defeated?
You make a giant, what would be I want to say a bear, because I'm imagining Winnie the Pooh inside of like a honeycomb, but that ain't right.
Yeah, I thought maybe like they'd bring it up in a sense of like, oh, how does the spider get scared of the wasp? Well, it doesn't get scared, but like, what's the main weapon?
What makes the wasp efficient?
Yes, and then sort of try and mimic that with whatever they can. I don't know. Like I thought it would make
that would make sense too. Again, I think that one of the biggest detractors here is the third act, where it feels like all the coolness is on display, but as soon as you stop to think about like, why is this happening? It's more so, honestly, it feels more realistic. It feels like, of course, the military is going to come in and just drop everything they have and hope something works. But from a movie perspective, you don't expect that to work. You expect something to go wrong until they have a specific weakness.
Yeah, it makes sense that napalm and bombs would just work because it's just a giant spider. It's not supernatural. It's not... You know, it might be tougher because it is so big, because, you know, a regular bullet's like a pinch, if that. Yeah. But it's not like suddenly got like thick armor all over its body necessarily.
I realized that to kill the giant wasp or the spider if they want, they just need to bring in a giant boot.
Okay.
That's it. If we're talking about scaling it up, you could just step on it. Easy enough. Giant boot.
We don't even need the wasp for that though. Just boot the spider.
Oh, yeah, I'm just, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. If they make the giant boot, just start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think despite everything we're saying, I think the movie works and is surprisingly fun in spite of these faults. Even though I think some of these faults we're talking about sound like they should be affecting it worse than it is. Like, there's definitely improvements to be made, but I think it's still a very watchable, fun B movie. And I think part of these problems are why it's a B movie and not some classic. Like, you know, there's a reason, there's something that separates something like Alien versus a lot of these 50s B movies with monsters, right? There is a reason why Alien is a masterpiece and why this is just, you know, a fun B movie from of an era where lots of schlocky B movies were made.
No, I honestly, as much as I was saying that the subplot is something I would be fine with seeing retracted, I do think it does kind of give, I'm going to say like a Twilight Zone sort of vibe. Like, it is still very entertaining in its own right. I still like what it's doing there. It just so happens that the movie's called Tarantula and we keep hinting that the tarantula is going to happen. So I almost innately don't get too invested with the subplot. I keep expecting it to just disappear. And when it finally does, I mean, it does. It's completely gone from the movie as we deal with the tarantula now. But it's enjoyable while you're there. It's still a good subplot to say, let's solve the mystery of, is this professor guy evil? Can they cure this acromegaly thing in time? Like, it's got its own positives, ignoring the tarantula part.
Yeah, it was still entertaining on its own right, and it makes, which is good because it makes up for a lot of the first half of the movie, pretty much. But it's definitely a case where this movie's about 80 minutes, and I think extending it by maybe another 20 would have been good. And you know, 100 minutes is not too long. 100 minutes, hour 40 is a pretty average length movie. If anything, less than average these days. But it's that, I think that would just give it that little bit of extra room. But of course, again, I think it's a budget thing. I think it's you know, just we have so many things we've figured out how to do from an effects point of view with the spider, and we don't really have much time to do much else. So it feels like the artistic or the reasons for some of the things happening are more about what can we actually do as opposed to having complete freedom to do whatever we can possibly think of. That's the difference here. So there's more of a charm to that, though, because it feels like, you know, they've pulled off everything they can, and what they've pulled off is impressive for 1955. It's just, you know, obviously if you're looking at it from like a complete vacuum of time, and you're just thinking about, okay, if you were making this now, what are some of the things we would apply to it to make it better? Yeah, we can suggest a good dozen things probably to spice it up and make it more tense and give it a bit more pizzazz or whatever. But but obviously, you know, I appreciate it for what it is. I think as far as, like, I enjoyed this more than It Came From Outer Space. Like, I think if I'm comparing those two, I think I had more fun with this.
Yeah. Absolutely. This one, it even just ignoring the sci-fi elements and stuff like that, I think the characters themselves are just so much more likable. Like, they brought in these actors and actresses who actually are very much likable people, and I would say it has a good sense of chemistry throughout it as well. And then layering on top of that the extra sci-fi plots and all that, it all works. It's all solid there. It is just something of, like you said, the limitations of the time make it so that the sci-fi itself could have been expanded on if we had waited another 10 years, another 15 years to just add a little bit of extra pump to that.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like monster movies, like this is a year after Godzilla, right?
Right.
And I think Godzilla is obviously the crown jewel of monster movies from the 50s, and no one really is going to call that a B movie. It's like one of the few 50s monster movies that isn't a B movie. And I think you see a bit more of that as you get in time. I mentioned Alien being a big one as well. And I think that's because, you know, it treats it with the seriousness and craft, and it feels like it's, you know, really, I think with Alien specifically, Alien's all about the tension. It's all about milking it for as much as possible, and you feel like you've gotten such a full roller coaster ride by the end. Whereas this, it feels like you get a couple of dips in the coaster and then it's over. You feel a little bit shortchanged in comparison to a more crafted script and experience like an Alien. But to compare it to Godzilla, which is obviously in the same time period, like Godzilla has a lot more weight behind it because it represents something, and there's so many more great visuals and so on. So it's a bit unfair, of course, but there's a reason why Godzilla is what it is and why it's cherished as this, and we only just did it on the show, a couple of weeks ago. So anyway.
No, I definitely think that, Godzilla represents all that stuff that we talked about in the review. I'm like 95% sure that what does the giant spider represent? It represents people who are afraid of spiders. Like that's it's not there for anything deeper than that. It's just spiders are creepy. Like that's it.
All right, David, what are you rating Tarantula out of 10?
It was weird over the course of the review. Like it started off with such a shocking image of the guy just stumbling through the desert, deformed and that dying. And I thought oh, okay, this is going to be something that's got a lot to it. If we're opening with such a powerful, just bam, this guy's dead. And then as I watched, it went down and down and down. And it wasn't quite what I was wanting it to be there. It was still good. It wasn't steep drop, but it was a slow decline. By the time it ended, I think I ended up higher than the lowest point of the movie. It got back up a little bit, but over the course of this review, I feel like it got up another half point again still, because looking at it as a whole, there is a lot more to it. It's a lot more enjoyable than just, the sum of its parts. I think that you get stuff out of the first section and then stuff out of the back end. And while you're watching it, it can feel a little bit but once you're done, I think it all really comes together with something. So I think I'm going to say this one is a 7. I was probably at a 6.5 going into this, but I'm going to bump it up to the 7.
Yeah, I actually think I agree with the 7. And I feel like if you watch the ratings rundown, this is the bonus segment we do for all these reviews over on Patreon, that's actually higher than most of the numbers, most of the categories I gave it. But I do think it is a little bit better than the sum of its parts, and it's just kind of a delightful B movie from the 50s that I have a good time. I think it's good. I enjoyed watching it again, and I can see myself watching it in the future. Especially if I'm in the mood for these types of movies. A marathon, I have 5 of them just playing in the background while I do stuff. This would absolutely be one that I'd want to put on in that mix. So, it's obviously it's a very specific acquired taste if you like old cheesy sci-fi movies, but I think it's a fun one. So, warts and all, 7 out of 10. That's Tarantula. So yes, obviously David's got his homework movie in a minute. I'll tell you what's coming next time on the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Next time we will be looking at a much bigger, more modern film, and that is we are returning to the Star Wars franchise for Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, which I think was the full correct title.
Something like that. It was what was the thing that set it apart? I think it's no crawl text at the beginning. I think that's the thing that the Star Wars stories don't have.
I don't know, it's not just that, but okay, that's one difference. So a movie that is actually kind of liked, although I'll be honest, I wasn't that fond of it when I saw it when it came out, so we'll see how I feel now. It's got your
boy directing it. The what's his name?
Gareth Edwards?
That's the one. You like his Godzilla.
I also liked what was that movie called we did? The Creator. I like that too.
So you good?
Yeah. But my memories of it aren't that particularly strong, so we'll see if my feelings have changed in the last decade, which it's almost been since it came out. So
I was going to say, there's nothing. Star Wars has only improved in people's minds over the time, right?
So that's what's coming next time on the show. And of course, if you want to support the Atomic Cinema Experiment, and as well as Collector's Cut or other movie podcast that me and David do, where we go through franchises and seasons of movies. We're doing Christmas movies for December, of course. And then we're doing another season of disaster movies in January and February. So if that sounds like fun, you can head over and check out those. Those have just started, actually, I think, by the time this one goes out. So
this is the last episode of the year. This is December 30th. This is coming out. Yeah.
We're a few weeks ahead, so I mean, I'm not realizing this is post-Christmas. But yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully Avatar was good last week. I have no idea at the moment, but I hope it was good. But yeah, so if you want to support everything, you can head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership and get access to the bonus rating rundown segments. And the big main bonus we do is a once a month bonus show called Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst things ever made. Sometimes they're really bad sci-fi movies. We don't necessarily say, oh, we can't do that on extra reels. It's technically a sci-fi movie. No, if it's bad enough, if it's low down enough, then we'll still do it on extra reels. For example, this year's War of the Worlds from Amazon Prime, brought to you by Amazon Prime and featuring plots heavily revolved around the delivery of Amazon Prime products.
Pete, how am I supposed to send you the file for this upload? If only there was a one-day delivery service that could send a flash drive. If only.
Yes, so if that all sounds like fun and you want to help support everything, you can go check out that. But otherwise, that is us, barring David's homework movie, where he goes back and checks out a movie from before he joined the show to catch up and be knowledgeable and whatnot. David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, I was debating doing the very first episode, Day the Earth Stood Still, because it is 1950s. It is in that same sort of period. But I decided to do one a little bit later on, and I did 1958's The Blob, because it seemed just a little bit more in line with the whole monster.
Yeah, a bit more
aesthetic.
B-movie. Yeah.
So I had seen the 88 one. I had to do that when we were doing our 80s countdown list. I never saw the 50s one. Having now seen the 50s one, I liked it. I honestly think that there are some aspects to the 50s one that might honestly surpass the 80s one in terms of maybe not, special effects or anything like that, but just in terms of character development and how concise and clear the plot is, making sure everything is very clear to figure out what's going on.
And 30-year-old Steve McQueen playing a teenager.
Yes, absolutely. That was... I think there's a title card at the beginning that says, like, and introducing the teenagers. And I was like, why is Steve McQueen listed there? He doesn't belong there. But no, I genuinely thought this one was a very well put together bit. I'm going to fully spoil the end of The Blob for anyone who doesn't know it. Just because I need to do it. We're at the end of the show. You already know. It's a positive. Go ahead, check it out if you haven't. But fully spoiling that, I feel like the end of the movie is almost like a proto-climate message, and I don't think they even meant it, because this is 1958, where it's the whole thing is that the blob is weak to cold, and so they say once they've defeated it, they're like, all right, we're going to airlift this thing to the Arctic. And then Steve McQueen says, well, that should hold it as long as the Arctic stays frozen. And I'm sitting there like, oh, you poor damned soul.
Yeah, that I remember talking about that in the review, and just how kind of like more impact that final moment has because of time passing. And it's like, well, I don't think they meant to be as poignant as they were with that, but it did actually come across.
It felt like an unintentional Planet of the Apes kind of thing, where like they could have just turned into the camera and been like, if only.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I do still like the 50s Blob. It's a fun 50s B movie. Probably on the same kind of level as Tarantula, more or less. There's some things that feel a bit weird, or characters that feel a bit, just kind of thin or whatever. But fun effects. I just think the 80s one's like way more fun. One, because the effects are a lot more gruesome. But also, I just think it's really like the humor in the 80s one is so good that I think that's what really puts it over the edge for me. But they're both fun movies.
The 50s is playing it straight. It's playing this is a film in that genre, whereas the 80s, it's doing that the same thing that like Grease did, where it's looking back at the 80s or looking back at the 50s with a little tongue in cheek to it. And so it's still technically part of the genre, but it's got its own little humor to it. And I appreciate both for very different reasons. Again, I think the special effects in the 50s one are not top tier, but I also think that they're surprisingly well done as well. I think it's the same sort of thing that we got out of Tarantula, where how do we make an amorphous goo threatening, and they do a good job with it. So
yeah, well, I think that's the other thing about comparing them. It's kind of fun is that 80s Blob is still pre-CG pretty much. I mean, technically, like one or two small examples of CG existed, but nothing, widespread. And I think that what's so interesting about it is like, oh, this is when practical effects got to their like zenith, like their A game. Right. Like this is when they perfected practical effects so much and how good they are. When people say, oh, I miss practical effects, they're not talking about 50s practical effects. They're talking about 80s practical effects,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Fun times.
So no, overall, I'll give that a 7.5. I think it's just a smidge above Tarantula. I do think it's got some higher quality acting to it, a little bit more a cohesive plot.
It's got a Criterion release, so that's something.
It does. It does. I've seen another Criterion film. I'm slowly becoming cultured.
Anyway, that's the show, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. We'll see you next time. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.